One handicap, college golfer looking for a general checkup on the swing. Not looking for any major technical fixes, and why would you with an action like that? So it's pretty clear that you are a fade player, and throughout all the swings you sent in, it took me a couple minutes to figure out exactly where we were going to go, but this face-on swing really exposed a move that I think you could improve on, which is not really your setup and backswing, as you make a pretty standard position. Club's a little long for a mid to short iron as you're bending the arms and wrists just maybe a little bit top. Gain some control by shortening things up toward the top of your swing. But as you sit to your front side, it looks like you're starting the weight transfer correctly, and well, you're one handicap with a nice looking impact position. Who could be surprised? In your follow through, however, there is a ton of club face roll, as it looks like you were just doing your damnedest to hold on to that face angle to play your fade before snapping it closed and then putting all your weight and pressure back to the trail foot in the follow through. Now, it's a pretty interesting looking move through the strike, so I mean, it's a good impact led to a follow through that almost kicks the weight and kicks the hip backward on the way through. Why is this happening? Now, it could be that you have so much hip speed that your hips are invert turning like Rory does, but I mean, it's a possibility. I think instead you lack hip tilt. Now, let's get another video from down the line here, and it's interesting to see as you change clubs how your swing angles change. So, speaking on the hip turn, let's watch just right here on that right hip. As you're going to drop that club shaft back down, the elbow tucks in as normal to keep a pretty solid plane, but then your right hip almost seems to rise up as you're kicking up and in off that trail foot. That's leading to a fairly level hip tilt and not getting you to have as much space as you need to keep that club working inside and then extending. So the more that your right hip can work down and through, the more that you can end up bending backward in your follow-through position and not having this follow-through that is almost leaning forward with the weight and head drawing forward, as opposed to bending back and getting your belly up. But I digress on that point. Let's snap back over one more time to this view. So what I wanted to look at again was your impact position with right hip tilt, where it's fairly level, and over to your driver where there's more continued speed and I feel no hitch or stall in the hips, or at least a much lesser stall. There's a much greater amount of right hip tilt, giving you that room and space to drive off your lower body better and continue the rotation. If your miss is a bit of a pull, I can see it happening because your hips would come to that stalling point and then that club face could pass through, just shutting it down and just not even drawing, just pulling it slightly to the left. So your driver, you're committed. You continue to drive the hips, which will force that right hip tilt down and continue the rotation, leaving the face open and maybe even a little bit too much on certain swings where an open face can bleed too far to the right. However, back to the iron, where we don't see quite as much of that hip tilt down. The knees drive up and in too close to the ball, maybe getting you a little bit on the heel and hitting a fake fade, but try to work that right hip more down through strike. Do have a tour comparison, so let's pull them up here. And yep, it is JT, and we're just going to try to watch that hip tilt angle with the black belt he's got on, which is a clear depiction given proper camera angles. And yeah, it's not extremely far down, but it is at an angle that gives him all this space to work his hand path through and through, cutting across and being able to extend the arms in the follow through, keeping the weight forward and head tilted back behind it. So mostly to fulfill the quoted video time, down to one sentence, work your right hip tilt more down in the downswing. Yeah, now we're going through JT clips. Although it's great, we don't need to see it. Up to the top, from this same position, you're going to flex this right knee down and in. Try to get that left hip to rise up, right hip to continue drive down and through, and I think that's going to help you continue that motion and not stall your lower body. Good luck. Sendaswing.com.